The incessant drizzle was Portland's signature in October 1991, a perpetual veil over the city, dampening spirits and polishing the streets to a reflective sheen. For Ellie Vance, known to her friends as Ellie, it was just another Tuesday. A rhythm she knew well, one that began before dawn and ended long after most of the city had surrendered to slumber. At 26, Ellie was a registered nurse at St. Vincent Medical Center, her bright, empathetic eyes often the first and last sight for patients on the night shift. Her life was modest but fulfilling. A compact apartment in the Alphabet District, northwest Portland, where the old Victorian houses stood shoulder to shoulder with newer, less distinguished brick buildings. Her Honda Accord, an '86 model, was reliable, if a little rusty around the wheel wells. Most mornings, after clocking out at 7:30 a.m., she'd drive the familiar route home, the radio playing something mellow, a brief respite before the day's sleep. Ellie had a quiet strength, a dedication to her work that bordered on the monastic. Nursing wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Her colleagues admired her calm under pressure, her ability to connect with even the most difficult patients. She had recently ended a 2-year relationship with David Miller, a grad student whose ambition had gradually outpaced their shared quiet evenings. There was no acrimony, just a mutual understanding that their paths diverged. Ellie found solace in her routine, in books she devoured on her days off, and in calls with her younger sister, Sarah, who was studying graphic design down in Ashland. Their parents, Robert and Susan, lived in Bend, enjoying a quieter life, always a phone call away, full of gentle worries and unwavering support. Lately, though, a subtle dissonance had crept into Ellie's carefully constructed world. Small things at first, a feeling of being watched, an unsettling awareness of eyes upon her, particularly in the dim hours before dawn, walking to her car. She'd mentioned it to Sarah once, dismissing it as fatigue, a byproduct of the night shift's disorienting schedule. "Just my imagination, sis," she'd said with a forced laugh, too many true crime paperbacks, but the feeling persisted. A dark sedan, a generic model she couldn't quite place, seemed to appear and disappear on her street with unnerving regularity, parked a little too close to the corner, its windows tinted, a phantom presence in the gray Portland mornings. She tried to ignore it, to logic it away. Portland had a lot of dark sedans, people came and went, she was just tired, but the unease deepened. A new patient, a man admitted for a minor injury, a sprained ankle, a broken finger, something trivial, had begun to make her particularly uncomfortable. Mr. Davies, he'd called himself. His eyes, she noted in her mind, were too intense, lingering on her a moment too long. He asked questions that veered from the professional to the personal, inquiries about her living situation, her hobbies, her schedule. He seemed to know things he shouldn't, small details she couldn't recall ever sharing. "You always look so tired, Miss Vance," he'd commented one night, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Working all alone in that big apartment of yours." Ellie had brushed him off, professional and polite, but inside a knot had tightened. She mentioned him in passing to a colleague, Linda, who just shrugged. "Creeps happen, hun. Just ignore 'em," easier said than done. On Thursday, October 17th, the day before she vanished, Ellie wrote in a small, leather-bound diary she kept tucked under her mattress. Her cramped, elegant script filled the page. "Mr. Davies was here again, even though he was discharged 2 days ago. Said he was checking on a friend. He was just sitting in the waiting area, watching the nurses. He looked directly at me. I walked by, tried to ignore it. When I got home, that dark car was parked down the street again. My skin is crawling. I hate this feeling. I wish I could shake it off. I don't like being alone right now." That night, Ellie completed her final shift of the week. She clocked out at precisely 7:30 a.m. on Friday, October 18th, 1991. The usual call to Sarah was brief, cheerful. "Dinner on Sunday, don't forget," Ellie promised. "I'll bring the wine." She walked out into the persistent mist, her hospital bag slung over her shoulder, a small smile playing on her lips, looking forward to a weekend of quiet reading. She got into her Honda Accord, the engine turning over with a familiar grumble. She drove the route she'd driven hundreds of times. But this time, Ellie Vance never made it home. When Sarah Vance's calls to her sister went unanswered all day Friday, a cold dread began to seep into her bones. By Saturday morning, after calls to St. Vincent confirmed Ellie hadn't shown up for her next scheduled shift, an unprecedented occurrence for the meticulous nurse, Sarah was on the phone to the Portland Police Bureau, her voice thin with panic. The officer on the other end, accustomed to weekend truancies and domestic squabbles, assured her they'd open a missing persons report, but didn't seem to share her urgency. Ellie was an adult, responsible. People sometimes just needed a break, but Sarah knew her sister. Ellie didn't just need a break without telling anyone. Detectives Marcus Thorne, a man whose weary eyes had seen too much of Portland's underbelly, and his younger, sharper partner, Olivia Reyes, were assigned the case. Thorne, a veteran with 20 years on the force, moved with a deliberate, almost paternal calm. Reyes, in her early 30s, brought a keen intellect and a restless energy. They started with Ellie's apartment in the Alphabet District. It was undisturbed, the few dishes in the sink, a half-read book on the nightstand, clothes laid out for the weekend. No signs of forced entry, no struggle. It was as if Ellie had simply stepped out. 2 days later, on Sunday, October 20th, Ellie's 1986 Honda Accord was discovered by a hiker. It was parked in a remote section of Forest Park, near a lesser-used trailhead accessible off Cornelius Pass Road, far from any residential areas. The car was locked, but the driver's side door was slightly ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry or intended to return. The keys were still in the ignition. Inside, nothing seemed amiss. No blood, no struggle. But Ellie's small leather purse, which she always carried, and her hospital ID were gone. Her wallet, surprisingly, was still in the glove compartment, untouched. This detail puzzled Thorne. Why take the ID and purse, but leave the wallet? The search intensified. Uniformed officers, K-9 units, and volunteers scoured Forest Park for weeks. The vast, dense urban forest, often shrouded in fog and rain, offered endless places for something to be hidden. They found nothing, no discarded items, no track, no disturbed earth. The weather, with its constant drizzle and rapidly falling autumn leaves, worked against them, washing away potential evidence, burying what might have been seen. Thorne and Reyes began the arduous process of interviewing everyone in Ellie's life. David Miller, her ex-boyfriend, was questioned thoroughly. He was cooperative, visibly distraught, and provided an ironclad alibi. He'd been at the university library, witnessed by multiple classmates working on his thesis. His grief seemed genuine. Ellie's colleagues at St. Vincent could offer little beyond descriptions of her professionalism and her quiet nature. No enemies, no known disputes, no secret lovers. Just the mention of the creepy patient, Mr. Davies, which Linda corroborated, but nobody had taken it seriously enough to note details. Davies had given an address, a P.O. box, and a name. Police followed up, but the P.O. box was inactive, and the name, Arthur Davies, yielded no criminal record or substantial leads in local databases. It was a dead end. Ellie's parents, Robert and Susan, arrived from Bend, their faces etched with a grief so profound it seemed to age them decades in days. Sarah was a constant, desperate presence at the police station, bringing old photos, recounting every detail she knew about her sister's life, convinced there was something they were missing. The local news channels picked up the story, plastering Ellie's kind, hopeful face across evening broadcasts. A beautiful, dedicated nurse vanished without a trace. The community rallied, posters with Ellie's picture and the words, "Missing, have you seen ELLIEVANCE?" appeared on lamp posts, bus stops, and storefronts across Portland. Vigils were held, prayers were offered, but weeks bled into months. The leads dried up. The initial surge of public interest waned, replaced by new headlines, new tragedies. The police, despite their efforts, were operating with limited technology. DNA profiling was nascent, not yet the powerful tool it would become. The focus was on traditional detective work, interviews, physical evidence, witness statements. And in Ellie's case, there was simply not enough. Her car had yielded only her own fingerprints. The area around it was too wet, too trampled by search teams to offer anything definitive. Without a body, without a crime scene, without any concrete evidence of foul play beyond her unexplained absence, the case of Ellie Vance slowly, tragically, turned cold. Detective Thorne filed the last report in early 1992, marking it inactive, a bureaucratic term that felt like a death knell to Ellie's family. The file, thick with unanswered questions, was relegated to the cold case archives, gathering dust in a forgotten corner of the precinct. The Vance family was left in a purgatory of unanswered questions, a silent scream trapped in their throats. Every distant siren, every news report about an unidentified body sent their hearts plummeting. Sarah, in particular, struggled. Her vibrant sister, her confidant, simply gone. The ache was a constant companion, a dull throb beneath the surface of everyday life. Years passed, holidays came and went, each one a stark reminder of Ellie's absence. The posters faded, peeled, and were eventually removed. Portland moved on, but the Vance family remained, suspended in the unbearable limbo of not knowing. The rain still fell, washing away the traces of time, but never the pain. 9 years later, the year 2000, Portland had grown, its skyline a little taller, its tech industry budding. The internet, once a novelty, was now a nascent fixture in homes and offices, transforming communication and information access. But for the Vance family, time had frozen on that rainy October morning in 1991. Robert and Susan had grown older, their hope a fragile, wispy thing. Sarah, now a successful graphic designer, carried the burden of her sister's disappearance, a shadow that never quite lifted from her life. Detective Thorne was still on the force, his hair grayer, his movements a little slower, the weight of unsolved cases etched deeper into his face. Olivia Reyes had moved to a federal task force, leaving the Portland bureau behind. On a bright, unseasonably warm afternoon in June 2000, almost 60 miles west of Portland, in the rugged expanse of the Tillamook State Forest, a group of geology students from Portland State University was conducting a field survey. They were mapping rock formations near the Nestucca River, deep within an area of dense, second-growth timber, far from established hiking trails. One of the students, a keen-eyed young woman named Maya Rodriguez, veered off the path to investigate a particularly interesting outcropping. Hidden by a thick curtain of salal and ferns, she stumbled upon a small, partially collapsed cave opening, little more than an overhang in a sheer rock face. It had clearly been opened by recent erosion, a minor landslide a few months prior. Curious, Maya squeezed inside, her flashlight beam cutting through the damp gloom. Tucked into a narrow crevice, almost completely hidden from view, lay a weathered, olive-green duffel bag. It was old, its canvas faded and mildewed, but intact. Her heart pounding, Maya called for her professor. Carefully, the bag was retrieved. Inside, wrapped in a thin, plastic garbage bag that had long since become brittle, were several items. A small, tarnished silver locket, engraved with the initials E.V. Ellie's locket. A distinctive floral hair tie, one Sarah instantly recognized from childhood. And then, the unmistakable scent. Vincent Medical Center ID badge, displaying a slightly smiling Ellie Vance, her name prominently printed beneath her photo. But the most significant find was a small, leather-bound diary. Its pages were delicate, some stuck together by moisture, but Ellie's neat, elegant handwriting was still legible. The last entry dated October 17, 1991. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Vance family, reopening wounds that had never truly healed. Sarah received the call from Detective Thorne, his voice somber but with an undeniable tremor of renewed purpose. He'd been the first detective they called, the one who had never quite forgotten the young nurse. He was now paired with a newer, tech-savvy detective, Kevin Riley, who was in his late 20s, brimming with the digital tools and fresh perspectives unavailable a decade prior. The diary was a time capsule, a direct line to Ellie's final days. Its entries detailed her growing unease, the feeling of being watched, the description of the dark sedan. And then the chilling specific mentions of Mr. Davies, the questions he asked, the way he seemed to know things about her personal life. The last entry was a desperate plea for relief, a confession of fear. Davies was outside my apartment again. My skin is crawling. I hate this feeling. I wish I could shake it off. I don't like being alone right now. Thorne, now with Riley by his side, pulled out the dusty Vance, Eliner file from the archives. The original report on Arthur Davies was a single, inconclusive page. P.O. Box, no records. Now, with a specific name, new technology, and a renewed impetus, Riley went to work. He cross-referenced the name Arthur Davies against national databases, utilizing the nascent power of the internet and interagency communication that barely existed in '91. They searched for aliases, for any historical records of a man matching Davies' description admitted to any hospital in the Pacific Northwest around that time. What they found was disturbing. Arthur Davies was indeed an alias, one of many. The real name, pieced together from fragmented records and old mugshots linked to minor harassment charges in Arizona and California from the late '80s, appeared to be Richard Caldwell. He was a drifter, a transient, known for targeting vulnerable women, often after brief, innocuous encounters. His pattern, charming at first, then intensely fixated, escalating to stalking and harassment. He'd disappear as soon as law enforcement got close, only to resurface in a new town, with a new name. Caldwell had a history of owning nondescript dark sedans, disposing of them quickly. The records indicated Caldwell had been in Portland in late 1991. He had even been admitted to St. Vincent for a minor injury, a cut to his hand, not a sprained ankle, but the detail of a brief hospital stay checked out. He'd been discharged just days before Ellie's disappearance. The original detectives hadn't made the connection because they hadn't seen the diary, hadn't known the extent of Ellie's fear, and the name, Davies, had simply been too generic for 91 search capabilities to flag effectively. Thorne felt a sick lurch in his stomach. The killer had been in their grasp, a name, an interaction, yet slipped through the cracks. They found reports of a dark sedan matching Caldwell's known vehicles being sold for cash in Sacramento, California, just 2 weeks after Ellie vanished. A lead that would have been gold in 1991, now a cold, distant trail. The reinvestigation, fueled by the diary's revelations and modern forensics, though still limited by the age of the evidence, became a desperate race against time. The duffel bag, though 9 years old, was painstakingly examined. Trace DNA, though degraded, was found on the interior lining, consistent with male epithelial cells. It didn't belong to Ellie or David Miller. It was a partial profile, enough to suggest a male presence, but not complete enough for a definitive match without a suspect profile to compare against. The diary itself was also examined for latent fingerprints, but the moisture and age had taken their toll, yielding only Ellie's own smudged prints. Detectives Thorne and Riley tracked Caldwell's aliases through various states, Colorado, Montana, then abruptly, the trail went cold in rural Arkansas in 1998. He was a ghost, leaving barely a ripple wherever he went, always moving. The discovery of the duffel bag in Ellie's diary did not bring Ellie Vance home. It didn't lead to an arrest, or a confession, or the recovery of her remains. But it brought a different kind of closure to the Vance family. The diary painted a clear picture of Ellie's final fears, connecting them irrevocably to the man known as Mr. Davies. It provided a name, a motive, a terrifyingly human explanation for her disappearance. Ellie had not simply vanished. She had been targeted, stalked, and likely taken by a predator who had moved through their lives like a silent shadow. The duffel bag's location in the Tillamook State Forest suggested a planned, deliberate disposal of her personal effects, far from the initial car discovery in Forest Park. It implied she had been taken alive from her car, driven to a remote location, and then her personal items had been hidden, perhaps by her abductor, as a cruel memento or a deliberate misdirection, to be found years later. Sarah, now an adult, held her sister's diary, its pages brittle but vibrant with Ellie's voice, her fears, her hopes. The locket, clutched in her hand, felt cold, heavy with unspoken goodbyes. The pain was still there, a raw, throbbing wound, but it was now laced with a bitter understanding. Ellie's case, while still officially open, had found its villain. Richard Caldwell, the man who called himself Arthur Davies, remained at large, a phantom living somewhere, perhaps under yet another name. He was suspected of abducting and murdering Ellie Vance, but without a body, without a definitive crime scene, and without a current location for Caldwell, the wheels of justice remained frustratingly stalled. The discovery had given them a truth, but not justice. Ellie Vance had disappeared in 1991, and 9 years later, a chilling truth surfaced, leaving her family with the heavy burden of knowing, but never truly finding peace. The rain still fell in Portland, just as it had that fateful morning, ceaselessly, silently, washing over a city that held its secrets close.